Hello, welcome to the channel Wise Stories. Enjoy watching.
New shoes? Were the old ones, Mom needs to go to the sanatorium. But when she saw her husband with his mistress in the restaurant, the woman decided to teach him a lesson. Lucia closed her eyes, overwhelmed by emotions. She adored these Italian shoes. Genuine leather, versatile black color, comfortable medium-sized heel, they were perfect for any occasion. The sales assistant was reciting something about this pair, how they were produced at a factory with a century of history, incorporating secrets from masters of the European fashion capital, all built on precision technology, but Lucia was barely listening. These pumps were every girl's dream, and they had to be hers. Especially considering that the elderly shoemaker, who worked in the booth around the corner, had told her the previous day that her old shoes wouldn't survive another restoration. She flew home, wings on her heels, imagining how harmoniously these shoes would look with her festive dress. A mother of 3 children, perhaps, shouldn't think so much about new things, but she was still a young woman, and all 3 sons, close in age, had grown up noticeably. No more moving from one maternity leave to another, she would be going out more, back to work, and even young Ventura had just turned 3. Lucia had been legally married to Angelus for 8 years. She was certain she had drawn a lucky ticket. 3 mischievous boys, aged 3 to 7, in addition. A dear mother-in-law, with whom Lucia had established a friendly relationship. How many women could boast such a full house of domestic values? Exactly. Humming a popular song under her breath, Lucia cooked soup in the kitchen. The Noggs family occupied a spacious 3-room apartment, which had come to Lucia from her grandparents. She barely remembered the old folks. Grandfather died early, his wife soon followed. Lucia's parents had their own small separate apartment, so they preserved this living space. When our daughter gets married, she'll have a place to live with her husband. They had seen it right. Angelus's mother was severely worn out by life. She and her son had squeezed into a communal apartment. So, the house was just in time for the young family. Lucia considered all these details of the older generation's life something like an appendix to her and Angelus's existence. She was sure that the younger generation was supposed to live better than their ancestors. It had always been that way. What's so strange about that? Whatever the parents didn't achieve, they would now make up for. So they didn't drag Angelus's mother Ada to live with them. She lived carefree and serene in her room full of antiques, working as a cashier in a grocery store. She was content and happy. Didn't help with the grandkids, saw them rarely, but also didn't drop in on her daughter-in-law for inspections. She gave all her unspent love more to Leo the cat. Lucia skimmed the foam off the chicken broth, reached for a packet of noodles from the shelf. She had recently found this manufacturer. The noodles were like homemade, no need to bother herself. Finely chopped onions, dill, mashed cooked carrots. The kitchen filled with enticing aromas. Everything would be ready soon. Angelus and the boys adored such soup. She would feed everyone, then talk to her husband about the shoes. She knew he was the only one working in the family, but this purchase was really necessary. She could convince him that expensive shoes last long and look beautiful. He would not be ashamed to go out with her somewhere. Angelus was late coming home that evening, arrived displeased, ate without appetite, was lost in thought about something. Lucia even gave him a back massage and brought him coffee. Her husband continued to be moody. How to ask about the shoes with him in such a mood? Unfortunate. He went to sleep after the coffee, paying her no attention. She was a wise woman and decided to postpone the discussion about the purchase to another day. To ensure she did not disturb the family head's peaceful rest, Lucia took the children to the nursery and started a slideshow on the projector. This old device was a part of her childhood. In a colorful metal box that used to contain halva, fairy tales lay neatly in rows. Lucia was always curious about which story the boys would choose for the evening. She was happy that they weren't glued to a tablet or TV all day. On the old colored films, projecting images onto a white sheet hung from the wardrobe, everything seemed more magical, more real. Perhaps it was just her childhood still alive in her. She thought about how she had barely worked in her profession since finishing university. Before studying at the agricultural department, she couldn't even imagine that higher education would be useful to become a competent, qualified florist. Lucia had been called our little florist since school. She didn't know for a long time that this nickname came from an old song. Yet, she passionately created charming compositions from plants, from dry herbariums to luxurious bouquets. In her hands, all flowers seemed 100 times more beautiful and brighter. Lucia and Angelus met in a mundane way. She was interning at a flower shop. He came in to buy a bouquet for his mother's 60th birthday. At that time, Lucia didn't know her future mother-in-law Ada, but she intuitively got the bouquet selection just right. Thus, the live gift from her son became not only the centerpiece of the table, but also of the entire evening at the cafe where they celebrated the milestone. All 6 guests admired it throughout the evening, constantly asking where he had bought such an exquisite wonder. Angelus immediately liked the young woman. She blushed at compliments and touched the flowers with tenderness. He invited her on a date. A romance began to whirl and swirl. In it, Angelus felt like a true gentleman, courting a young, inexperienced lady. Understandably, he was 12 years older than Lucia. Not that he was an experienced Casanova, but he had had his fair share of women. The idea to marry young, attractive Lucia was suggested by his mother. She reasoned wisely. The girl is head over heels in love with you, and you are seriously smitten as well. She's healthy, strong, reliable. At nearly 35, it's somewhat unseemly to still be a bachelor. People might think you're incapable of anything significant in life. It's high time you had children. Lucia is the perfect candidate for a compliant wife. Angelus agreed with Ada's arguments. Lucia fit the bill in every respect. Plus, she owned a 3-bedroom apartment. So, they wouldn't have to squeeze in with her parents or his mother. This last fact finally pushed him to the registry office. His bride beamed with happiness. After the wedding, Lucia quickly became pregnant, learned to run the household properly, and cooked deliciously. He was greeted warmly at home, so he came to terms with the fact that she had borne him 3 boys one after another. They barely made ends meet financially. That's just how everyone lives, from paycheck to paycheck. They weren't the first, nor would they be the last. It never occurred to Angelus that the family's well-being, raising 3 sons, was his direct responsibility. Educationally, he was a designer, practically a mediocre specialist who barely managed his assigned tasks and saw no need to improve his professionalism. Everything was unstable but manageable, and well, God be with it. Lucia would come up with something again, cook a miracle from nothing. Her mother would alter the older boys' clothes for the younger ones. He was so lucky that she never demanded furs, diamonds, or trips to foreign resorts. He was thrilled last year when he finally received a bonus for a recent order, and they went to the sea. His mother was right, he had landed an excellent wife and homemaker. She was content with little, unlike the wives of his colleagues and friends. She got along with everyone, and look at how wonderfully the boys were growing. He ought to treat his mother to something nice. Currently, at work, they were all getting to grips with a new serious contract. If it all works out, he would send Ada to some sanatorium. Let her improve her health, spend some time among people. Ada had raised her son on her own. Her good-for-nothing husband, Vito, had vanished from her horizon when she talked about having a second child. Ada's husband was a true poet, a creative soul whose collection of works dedicated to labor had been published. After that, the muse left Angelus's father for someone else. And the poet, as usual, started drowning his sorrows at the bottom of a glass. Ada, who worked as a saleswoman at the time, was exhausted but silently managed both her husband and son. The husband filed for divorce proudly, peppering his speech with quotes. Ada did not support his lofty impulses. Everyone wants to eat, and it's cold without proper clothing. After shifts at the store, she'd rush to clean neighboring buildings, no time to float in the clouds alongside her husband. She loved Angelus very much, was happy to be pregnant again, a brother or sister for her little boy, but the husband could go his own way, she would manage on her own. Her dreams of having a second child never came to be. In the courtyard of the building where she worked part-time, the asphalt collapsed, creating a pit. Fixing it was certainly not part of Ada's responsibilities. But imagining that some child might fall into the deep opening, she couldn't stand aside. She pushed a wheelbarrow of sand to try to fill in the cracks somewhat. Heavy buckets, chronic fatigue. The doctors could do nothing. Ada lost not only her second child, but also her chances of ever becoming pregnant again. She was grief-stricken. Her only solace was her son Angelus, now her sole joy. Ada did not raise Angelus to be a classic mama's boy. Far from it. They lived modestly. The boy was not spoiled with delicacies, fashionable clothes, or enticing electronic toys. He was among the last in his class to have an old computer and a second-hand cell phone at home. Ada was promoted at some point in her cleaning job and at the store. Instead of washing the building's entrance, she now worked as a housekeeper on weekends for two wealthy families in the same building, and at the store, now a supermarket, she moved to a cashier's chair. She didn't have to stand all day at the counter anymore. Ada adhered to a firm principle that even children raised with difficulty owe their parents nothing later. Angelus never once heard from her. "When you grow up, you'll be feeding me. I've spent my whole life on you, so you can hand me a glass of water in my old age." Indeed, Angelus grew up to be anything but greedy. However, he had another unpleasant flaw: he was immature. Not like a royal heir, but in the sense that he was in no rush to act mature or take responsibility. From childhood, he always waited for mommy to make decisions for him. Was it up to him to decide who he wanted to be at the New Year's school play? Or what to choose when writing an essay on a topic of his choice? He couldn't even decide whether he preferred porridge or a sandwich for breakfast. Why bother thinking about more profound matters? His grades were neither good nor bad, and Ada never had time to check his homework. She trusted him entirely in this, quite wrongly. Angelus blatantly ignored his school years. Why bother exerting himself? If things started to heat up and teachers threatened to call his mother to school, he would lazily catch up, doing his homework haphazardly for a few days. After getting a few decent grades, he would slack off until the next scolding from the teachers. Ada didn't have the time to chase him for studying or to sort all this out. Ada's main flaw was her strange wastefulness. She would receive her paycheck and immediately spend half of it in her store. Unfortunately, it was on trivial items. On plain dishes with bright polka dots, bedding with large flowers, large paper napkins with holiday prints. If someone visited their home, they would surely be struck by the contrast on the table. Expensive, beautiful napkins did not harmonize well with the modest assortment of dishes and cheap crockery and cutlery. For Ada, on the contrary, it seemed that this brought a touch of luxury into her home. She didn't have time to notice what her son was really like as he grew up. Thus, Angelus turned out to be a young man with a nobleman's pretense. On the outside, he looked like a pretty nice guy, could hold a conversation on any topic, was kind and polite. But if you dug deeper, inside there was a void of nothingness. Angelus was not interested in anything, nothing sparked his enthusiasm. Mom would come up with everything and make all his decisions. By the time Angelus was of marriageable age, Ada was thoroughly exhausted. She started to fall ill often. No wonder. Angelus was about to turn 35, and he was still not married. There would be no one to look after him if her illness worsened. She would have continued to pamper him herself, but her joints, the darn things, were giving her too much trouble. All her hard work over the years began to take its toll as she approached 60. She tried to match her son with the neighbor's daughter and even invited the store manager's niece for coffee and cake. Her son looked at all her attempts and just laughed lazily. "Mother, stop all these schemes of yours. I'm not starving for a woman's warmth. I can always find a girlfriend for a couple of nights." So why do I need long and boring romances with courtships and unnecessary ceremonies? And then suddenly, her anniversary came, and with it, that splendid bouquet of peonies that were both delicate and regally luxurious. Not the most intricate flowers, but combined with some green branches and the luxurious leaves of some plants, they were mesmerizing to the point that it was hard to look away. After the banquet, Ada clung to Angelus with a death grip. I don't know, son, where you found that bouquet, but my heart tells me it was assembled by very caring hands of someone with a big heart. Was it a woman florist? Angelus racked his brain. No, Mom, it was a very young girl. She assembled her creation right before my eyes, and I instantly knew it was just what was needed. Ada reacted instantly. Son, you must go to this girl and thank her for her effort and dedication. A mother's heart, an impeccable oracle. At that moment, the woman sensed that this new acquaintance of her son would lead to something more. Lucia, the mother-in-law, immediately welcomed her with open arms and delightedly observed that her Angelus had come alive for the first time, seemingly even in love. Then she began to push him towards marriage. As if she felt that she would soon fall ill permanently and needed to pass her son into good hands sooner rather than later. She was not wrong. The young couple lived harmoniously, grandchildren followed one after another, but she was physically unable to help with the children anymore. She stayed home more often, and to keep from feeling lonely, she picked up a stray kitten from the courtyard. With its ginger fur, it reminded her of a little lion. So Leo appeared in her room in the communal apartment. Lucia put the boys to bed, peeked into the bedroom where her husband was peacefully snoring. She was a bit annoyed that she hadn't been able to tell him about the extraordinary Italian shoes. But that could wait until tomorrow. For now, it was also time for her to go to bed. She was about to start arranging for Ventura to attend kindergarten, needing to slowly get back into a working routine. Last week, she had sent out her resume along with a portfolio featuring photographs of her bouquets to various flower shops. She really hoped that someone would take an interest. Lucia tossed and turned a bit more, then fell into a deep sleep. The next morning was a usual one. Getting first grader Zacharias ready for school, dropping Vidal at the daycare on the way, and then stopping by the pediatric clinic with Ventura for some documents. It was good that she had made pancakes the night before. She would just reheat them in the microwave, and breakfast would be ready. Lucia decided not to bring up the new shoes. Angelus was already in a foul mood that morning. After lunch, when she brought Zacharias home from school and sat him down to eat, an email popped up on her laptop. One of the flower shops invited her for an interview. Inspired, Lucia immediately called her husband to share the good news. If the job worked out, they would be a little better off financially. Angelus only muttered unclearly in response. Are you really sure you'll be able to manage everything? Then I have no objections, go for it. Lately, he had found a new fascinating preoccupation, one that also required financial investment. But it was better that Lucia didn't know about it. Let her peacefully deal with her porridges and slide films. The man smiled contentedly, lost in pleasant memories. Pamela. A woman of delight, with whom he had recently made an accidental acquaintance. With her, Angelus felt like he was soaring above the clouds. For her, he would move mountains and pluck a star from the sky. Meanwhile, Lucia sighed as she pulled her old shoes off the shoe rack. How was she supposed to go out to potential employers in such a sorry state tomorrow? She would have to wear jeans, a sweater, and her worn sneakers again. At least they were white and looked pretty, despite their cheapness. Wrapping the shoes in newspaper, the woman made her way to the cobbler. Let's see if they can still be salvaged. She hadn't worn them for that long. 5 years, no more. A surprise awaited her at Uncle Pablo's booth. A new craftsman. A man around 40 with smiling eyes. Some people just have a way of warming others with their gaze. He looked at you, and you felt at ease. The cobbler examined her shoes carefully, looked into her eyes, and asked, Do you want to give them a second life? Don't be upset, I'll try, but on one condition. You let me reshape them my way, deal? Lucia did not object. She only asked one thing. This will probably be expensive? Such a repair might be out of my budget. But the craftsman immediately reassured her. Making shoes is my passion, especially if it's a challenging case and the pair is a favorite of the client. I'll charge you no more than I would for replacing heel tips. I'm curious to see how it turns out. With that settled, they agreed that Lucia would come back for her shoes in 2 weeks. As they were now, the shoes were unwearable anyway, so she had nothing to lose. That same evening, she finally brought up the topic of the Italian shoe miracle with her husband. She presented all her arguments for it, passionately convincing Angelus that she wouldn't ask for anything else anytime soon. His reaction left her stunned. He sarcastically inquired if she remembered that he was supporting 4 dependents. He reminded her that his mother needed to be treated at a sanatorium for her health issues and declared that he was already saving up for Ada's trip. Lucia gave in without a fight. Angelus was right in everything. Buying those Italian shoes would have seriously impacted their budget. She had no right to jeopardize their financial well-being. The topic was closed, but Angelus couldn't settle down. He fiddled with his food, criticized the meal, listlessly poked at a piece of tomato, then finally conceded. Lucia, I remember all that you do for us. Just hang on a little longer. Winter is coming, and you still have good boots, but by spring we can buy those shoes. You'll get a job and earn some money. Angelus could not afford extra expenses right now. Pamela wanted him to disappear with her for a weekend at a country resort where she promised him an unforgettable time. He felt he could become anything for his mistress, even a submissive slave, a wallet full of money, a sponsor of her desires. Pamela didn't bother with trivial things like Italian shoes. For the first time in his life, he was ready to work like an ox, strive and improve. But why had he listened to his mother and married Lucia? He deserved more. Never before in his life had he had such a motivator. His mother and wife managed all problems and difficulties without his effort. To Lucia's great surprise, her interview at the charming flower shop went splendidly. She was immediately given the task of assembling several thematic bouquets for different occasions. She excelled at the task. Even the shop owner didn't hide the fact that his eyes lit up at the sight of her creations, and his verdict was pleasant. Now I see that the photos in your portfolio are real. You didn't use someone else's flower arrangements. You think on your feet, have a rich imagination. Our company often handles the decoration part of banquets during catering services. I would like you to start work on Monday. The last time Lucia felt this happy was when Angelus proposed to her. Now, she felt as though she was starting a new life filled with pleasant moments. The size of the salary offered genuinely delighted her. She was determined to work hard, save up, and buy those wonderful Italian shoes herself. Yes, their family would no longer be so financially constrained. They could afford to send Ada to the sanatorium and even treat themselves to something nice. The next day, they took little Ventura to the daycare for half a day for the first time. She didn't want to traumatize the boy with a long separation right away. It was comforting that Vital went to the same daycare and could look out for his younger brother if needed. They never mistreated Ventura. Lucia sometimes smiled to herself. Her beloved sons reminded her of fairy tale heroes, all sturdy, curly-haired, standing up for each other like a wall. How good it was that she had decided to have them close in age. She managed everything. They were growing not by days, but by hours, almost like the heroes in fairy tales. In the courtyard of her building, Lucia unexpectedly ran into the cobbler who had taken on repairing her old shoes. He didn't notice her, but she recognized him immediately. The man leaned on a cane, walking strangely, first putting down his heels and then rolling his feet forward. Thinking the cobbler might be ill or injured, she quickly forgot about him. She didn't even notice that old Uncle Pedro greeted him at the entrance, helping him up the steps by firmly grabbing his elbow. Angelus was pleased with the news. The younger son would now peacefully attend daycare with the middle one, and Lucia's mother would pick up the oldest from school by arrangement and take him to her place. His wife would pick him up after work. He would have even more time for his darling Pamela. And his wife would finally stop with her requests and reminders about money. Things couldn't be better since he had to endure this woman who had become utterly uninteresting to him. Delighting in her silly flowers, what an achievement, he thought scornfully as he submitted a sketch to his boss without a single error or remark that day. Soon they would complete the entire order. With the bonus due, he planned to take his beloved woman to a spa hotel where they would be alone. No boring Lucia, no boys. Life was getting on track. Why do women so quickly become dull mice after marriage? His Lucia, for instance, always wore a worn-out robe at home. Her lush hair was always up in a messy bun. No makeup, no nail polish. Even when they went out, she wore the same beautiful dress that everyone was tired of seeing. Every date with Pamela, she wore a new outfit. Where does a woman's charm go after marriage? Or was it just his bad luck? Fortunately, Lucia was so tired by the evening that she didn't even notice his lack of passion for her. It was a blessing she was too busy to pay attention to it. All this domestic hustle was disgusting to watch. To round off the family evening, Angelus read fairy tales to the boys at bedtime. He did it deliberately. While he busied himself putting the boys to bed, tired Lucia fell asleep. He was relieved that he didn't have to hug or kiss her goodnight. These routines had recently become more painful than a toothache. Even though his wife approached him for a kiss out of habit, he didn't want to keep up the ritual. The next morning, Angelus was extra generous with his attentions. It was Friday. He decided to treat his family generously. He gave Lucia money for fun, adding, "Here's some money for you rascals to have fun with. I'll be working this weekend. I'm buried under with the project deadlines. You and your mom, since everyone starts a new life on Monday, go to the movies or sit in a pastry shop. Has your dad been working his fingers to the bone from morning till late evening for nothing?" The happy little heroes, pleased with the surprise from their father, immediately came to their mother with a request. "Mom, let's not tell Dad, but instead of going to the movies, can we go to the new water park that just opened near the city? It's such a gloomy autumn outside. Every day is either overcast with rain, clouds, or wind, but it'll be like being back in the sunny summer at the sea." Lucia smiled to herself, glad that all the books she read to her boys were not in vain. There was Zacharias, giving a whole persuasive speech like an adult. She was pleased that her efforts were fruitful. Why not truly immerse themselves in the turquoise waters of the warm pools and slide down both steep and gentle slides? Lucia was about to check her small stash of money, saved from the funds given to her by Angelus. Sales and special offers in stores hadn't been canceled, and she was adept at navigating them, ensuring that a portion of the money from shopping remained in her wallet. Most often, she spent these bonuses on her sons. Sometimes, she quietly bought herself a new lipstick or a hair clip for her unruly hair. Now, they would spend all her reserves on the water park. Tickets there were pricey, but you only live once. There was no need for Angelus to know about the changes in his recommendations. He was already too strict about monitoring all her expenses. On Saturday, the little partisans, Zacharias, Vital, Ventura, and their squad commander Lucia, lovingly saw Dad Angelus off to work. They obediently ate breakfast. Commander Mom told them they needed to be fully prepared for real adventures. The water park was a 2-hour drive from the city. They might get hungry on the way, and they could only afford to snack at the water park once, given the prices there. The little heroes listened to their leader unquestioningly. They could hardly believe that on this chilly autumn day they were heading towards summer fun. Everyone dozed off a bit on the bus, as they had to wake up earlier than usual on this Saturday. At the water park, the sleepiness evaporated. It was magnificent. Cascades of pools under artificial palms of varying depths, colorful slides sorted by difficulty, rows of loungers, soft fluffy towels, a food court with restaurants and cafes where enticing smells of coffee, vanilla, and fresh pastry filled the air. Initially, Lucia was a bit shy in her old faded swimsuit, once bought by her parents for a youth camp. But she had a nice figure, and no one around paid any attention to their group. Within half an hour, they were all splashing in the kiddie pool. You couldn't leave Ventura alone there, better they all stay together. 3 hours in the aquamarine water, cozy, very warm, and clean, flew by in a moment. Suddenly, the entire team was ravenously hungry. They decided to find a more modest cafe, where they didn't serve fancy dishes, but simpler fast food. After changing into dry clothes, Lucia and the boys set out to explore. It was lively behind the glass walls of the tasty establishments. A vigorous swim wakes up a monstrous appetite in anyone. Suddenly, Zacharias, leading the way, grabbed Lucia by the hand. "Mom, look, there's Dad sitting with some lady in a red dress at that table." Lucia thought Zacharias had gotten a little too chilled. "I told you it was time to get out of the water, but could I get you guys out?" The reality turned out to be worse than any child's fantasy. Behind the glass, literally 5 meters from her, Angelus was indeed cooing with some pretty woman. She knew her husband very well. The soft tilt of his head, eyes sparkling with passion, a happy smile, this was how he was at the beginning of their relationship. But judging by how the woman was whispering something in his ear and rolling her eyes languorously, these two were already close. Lucia's vision darkened. Their sons, Angelus's and hers, shifted uncomfortably nearby, and she couldn't yet think of what to say to them, how to explain what they had seen. A solution found her. She gathered herself, put on a mask with a calm smile, and explained. "Dad warned me he would have an off-site business meeting at a restaurant today. Working with projects isn't always just drudgery in the office. Many issues are resolved in a relaxed setting. And now, so he doesn't notice us, we need to quickly disappear. We can't let Dad know our secret, that instead of the movies, we cooled off at the water park and even saw him at this place we couldn't afford." Her beloved heroes unanimously nodded that they would keep silent. Lucia warmly hugged them, pushing towards the exit. "There's a cozy cafe nearby with homemade food, let's have lunch there." Different thoughts raced through her mind. What a strange choice of place for a date. The restaurant where the two lovebirds cooed was undoubtedly trendy, having recently opened and already become a popular spot. However, its location in the water park somehow didn't fit with a meeting of two lovers. Amidst her chaotic thoughts, Lucia tried to suppress her sadness and disappointment. There are people who put their soul on the family altar, giving their all, yet they can never forgive betrayal and infidelity. She was one of them. Angelus was now forever erased from her heart with the fiercest soldering iron. She knew for sure she no longer had a husband. Lucia counted the cash in her wallet, setting aside money for bus tickets. The remaining amount barely covered 4 servings of hearty chicken broth and 4 meat pies. It wasn't much, but they wouldn't starve on the way home. And how good it was that she was starting a new job on Monday. Perhaps they would even give her some sort of advance soon. She thought of Angelus as if he were a stranger. There were no tears, just a scorched emptiness inside. She would file for divorce, but first, she would teach him a lesson. That evening, a call came from Angelus. He apologized for not coming home to sleep, arguing that leaving the office for a few hours made no sense. The project deadline was looming. Rest and relaxation would come later. Lucia listened to him with such indifference that she surprised herself. For the first time, she was relieved not to have to make excuses or prepare dinner for her husband. She and the boys would eat now. Then she would send them to watch cartoons on their own while she reviewed her wardrobe. She needed to look decent on her first day of work. On the eagerly awaited Monday, Lucia was tasked with designing a concept for decorating the grounds and hall for a wedding with vintage motifs by Saturday. The decoration for the celebration was to include wooden cabins on a forest clearing. The restaurant itself was also styled in a similar rustic fashion. There was a well with a crane, fences with pots on the trellis, and wooden benches with ornate backs. All this needed to be decorated not with neat bouquets, but with bunches of wildflowers. No orchids or roses. Only daisies, poppies, clematis, and cornflowers. Lucia was amazed at her luck. An independent project, virtually without supervision, was entirely up to her. How important such trust is to any person. It inspires, motivates, and encourages. She tried very hard not to let her new employer down. The outcome exceeded everyone's expectations. By the following Monday, she received her first paycheck. On her way home, she bought 2 boxes of pastries, expensive gourmet coffee, and movie tickets for Saturday. What a miracle, Lord! After all these expenses, she still had money left. Her financial independence from her husband was now extremely important to her. It was utterly disgusting and somewhat painful to watch the deceitful cheater. At home, Angelus didn't even notice that he was not greeted by the loving wife he knew, but by a stranger. Indifferent to him. She would robotically place a plate of dinner on the table and then disappear into the children's room. She went to sleep in the living room. But he actually liked this arrangement. He wouldn't say a single extra word. Now her arsenal for him consisted of: dinner's on the table, I'll be late tomorrow, pick up the kids from daycare, I need the bathroom in the morning too. Without explaining why, she no longer made him delicious coffee, didn't ask what he'd like her to cook from the groceries in the fridge, didn't send him to spend time with the kids. She didn't even ask him for money anymore. Angelus stupidly let all this pass by his ears and heart, still exhilarated by his trip with Pamela to the restaurant in the water park. His imagination that they were at the sea, under palm trees, not realizing that this restaurant paradise was a mirage. Everything would be artificial. Yet he was thrilled that he could treat her lavishly, even though she didn't want to swim in the pools, but happily showed off a new dress in the restaurant, bought with his money. Then, for the first time, she let him stay overnight. It was like a fairy tale. He eagerly awaited a repeat, oblivious to the behavior of his increasingly tedious wife. In the evenings, 2 icebergs now crossed paths in the family, cold, winter, hearts frosted over. The ice cracked when Lucia received her first full paycheck and a small bonus. At first, Angelus cautiously asked how much they had paid her, then was incredibly surprised by such a large amount. He had never earned that much himself, immediately began plotting how to coax the money out of his wife. But Lucia was ahead of him. Angelus, sit down, we need to talk. I've decided to divorce you. Our family has just been maintaining the appearance of the happiness and prosperity we once had for quite some time now. It's even starting to feel like I've been living in a daze all these years with you. I've always counted every penny. I've never been able to buy myself or the kids even a fraction of what we really wanted. I now know for certain that my husband is a miser. But what really was the last straw wasn't even that. I was shocked by your lie about Ada needing to go to the sanatorium. I visited your mother yesterday, whom you have completely neglected. I brought her groceries, medicine, and food for Leo. Do you even know that she hasn't been able to leave the house for over a month because her legs have gotten so bad? That it's not us but compassionate neighbors who help her? Or has your mistress completely consumed all the attention of a son who loves his mother? Have you become so indifferent to an elderly woman who is completely alone because of us? Angelus froze. What a turn of events. Lucia knew about Pamela and had said nothing, but how, from where? He didn't know whether to rejoice or be sad, whether to pack his bags to fly to Pamela on the wings of love or wait. Such matters aren't decided impulsively, and he didn't know his wife could show her teeth. Meanwhile, Lucia's monologue turned to practical matters. She clearly and articulately told him that he had a couple of days to move out of her grandparents' apartment, that she needed neither alimony nor his help nor his involvement in the children's upbringing. She didn't want him to have any influence on them, to prevent them from growing up to be misers with cold and indifferent hearts. Angelus listened to her with a smirk on his face, spitefully thinking, a woman off the cart is easier for the horse. She even plans to haul the boys herself. How foolish, she thinks she can raise 3 boys alone. Well, what do I care about all this anymore? I'll live with my mother for the time being, we'll get divorced, then I'll propose to Pamela. She's definitely my woman. So young, only 25, and she chose me, not so young anymore. I'm already over 40, and such a charming person by my side. Sometimes it's hard to believe. Lucia watched Angelus, who wasn't very skilled at hiding his feelings and emotions. Now, his face reflected everything at once: contempt and sarcasm, feigned indignation and poorly concealed joy, greed and greediness, dreams of freedom and indifference to what happens next with Lucia and the sons. She was shocked that it took her 8 years to realize who the man beside her was. Could female naivety be so strong when love lives in the heart? After their conversation, they parted like ships in the sea. Lucia was pleased that Angelus had the decency not to claim the apartment. Meanwhile, Angelus dreamed of how he would announce to Pamela at their next meeting that he would soon be free, wondering only where to find money for a fancy date to tell his beloved the good news in a fitting setting. Unable to think of anything better, he quietly went to the hallway and stole money directly from Lucia's wallet. In his heart, he was absolutely sure there was nothing shameful about it. He had supported this woman and her children for years. A few thousand wouldn't impoverish her, and he would add this sum to what he had. It was time to set a date with Pamela. Angelus fell asleep very pleased with himself and his cleverness. The next day, as Lucia was preparing an exotic bouquet of bright blue and yellow field irises, she remembered that she had given her old shoes for repair almost a month ago. How awkward things had turned out with this new cobbler, especially after what she learned about him in a conversation with old Uncle Pedro. That dialogue had made quite an impression on her then. She thought about the bitter fates people endure. The old cobbler told her that his grandson, Otan, didn't have any toes left on his feet. They were removed after he got frostbite. He used to work in the mountains in the north as a guide and conductor for tourists who liked to venture where hardly anyone had ever set foot. During one of these trips, he got caught in an avalanche. It passed very close by, barely missing them, but managed to cover them in a substantial amount of snow. He was involved in rescuing and evaluating his charges until he ran out of strength. He lost consciousness, and the reckless adventurers didn't immediately bother to inform the emergency services that they were not alone in the mountains. He miraculously survived. After that injury, he also briefly lost his memory. He worked in a rotational method, without much official documentation. It was not easy to trace him in the mountain expanses, especially if one did not look very diligently. So, while his legs healed and he underwent a few months of rehabilitation at a clinic, his wife found a replacement. Maybe she even had this lover before that, who knows? They lived in a rented apartment. When he returned home after his injury, his wife and daughter were gone. He found them, not a needle in a haystack, but little Ophelia already calling another man daddy. Otan rarely saw her. He was always away earning money while his wife raised their daughter, not working. They parted amicably. Otan didn't try to prove to the girl that he was her biological father. Upon learning all this, Pedro invited his grandson to join him. Why suffer alone? Especially since he had gradually taught Otan the shoemaking craft in his childhood and youth, and the man had even turned it into his hobby later. He sometimes crafted handmade shoes that were simply irresistible. So, it was his turn to take over. Pedro was very tired of maintaining his little shop. Let Otan pick up this baton. After work, Lucia rushed to the cobbler's. Now she had the money to pay him for his work. So, she felt confident. The man greeted her with a smile again. He didn't reproach her at all for being away so long, quite the opposite. Good afternoon, my dear customer. It's good that you didn't show up right away. I confess, I couldn't restore your shoes. I started working on them, and they unfortunately fell apart in my hands. But I didn't give up. I cut and sewed new ones for you, based on the size of the old ones. Look what I've managed to make. Lucia held a pair of shoes that Otan had crafted for her and couldn't believe her eyes. Could those Italian shoes even compare to this masterpiece? She wasn't an expert on footwear, but even at a glance, it was evident that Otan had undeniable talent in this field. The shoes turned out elegant and sturdy, made of soft, touchable leather, and a beautiful nude color of a universal design with a sturdy and comfortable heel. She tried them on immediately, and they fit her feet perfectly. Otan watched all her maneuvers with pleasure, then declared, "I won't take any money from you for the work. I've been watching you for a long time, how you fuss around your boys, carry full bags home after work, rush to work in the morning. You know, such a woman you want to hide behind your back and protect with all your might from all life's hardships. Forgive me for speaking so directly. I'm not good at beating around the bush or hiding anything. I find you very attractive." Lucia was stunned. "How can this be? You put so much effort into these shoes, and I can't even thank you properly. It's not right. You know what? I think your name is Otan. I'm Lucia. Tomorrow's Saturday. My boys and I have planned a day of delicious calzones. We make them together, even little Ventura. Come visit us." Otan just sighed in response. "Thank you, Lucia, for such a generous invitation. My grandfather told me he shared my story with you. Why would you want, even just as a friend, a disabled companion? My wife outright told me to go away far. That it's impractical to live with a cripple, that I wouldn't be able to earn a living, support a family. She used some fancy word. I remember now. She said that in terms of gender, I am now an incomplete man, unable to provide for my loved ones as I should." Lucia looked at him attentively, thought for a moment. "Otan, I'm sorry you had to hear all these unpleasant things. I'm a grown woman now, providing for and raising my children alone. Forget all that nonsense about what a man must do and what a woman must do. Any partnership is about both people contributing to the relationship. It doesn't really matter who earns the money or who adds firewood to keep the family warm. Besides, there's another side to your situation. You're incredibly talented when it comes to making shoes. Trust someone with a creative spirit when I say this, there will be lines of people waiting for your shoes. Fashionistas will consider it an honor to wear a pair like the ones you made for me. I'll show your work to my boss. He has extensive connections in the city, with many clients in various circles. We'll revisit this conversation in a year. In the meantime, I'm expecting you over tomorrow. And yes, I know someone like you wouldn't come empty-handed, so you bring the juice. We love having calzones with it." Angelus couldn't understand why Pamela was upset again. He had followed all her orders, taken a job as a courier that paid far more than his position at the design office. Delivering groceries of any weight in any weather, hauling them upstairs often without an elevator, looking obsequiously into customers' eyes in hopes they'd be generous with tips. He practically brought home money in his teeth for his woman, and yet she kept repeating that it was barely anything. How had they survived on even less when there were 5 of them? The food was always hot and tasty. Recently, Pamela insisted that he move back in with his mother. She didn't want to see him 24/7. He was always afraid she'd find someone younger and wealthier. After all, she'd never agreed to change her status from his girlfriend to his wife. Angelus didn't feel even a shred of guilt about the fact that he hadn't been the one to send his mother to the sanatorium. He was too busy dealing with his lover's whims. It was Lucia who did it. His ex-wife, in his opinion, had gotten too full of herself. She was now managing a department in a chain of flower shops. Everyone there respected her endlessly, hanging on to every word and piece of advice she gave. As if she was some great boss. Moving flowers in pots and beds from place to place wasn't exactly an impressive skill. He also deliberately refused to meet up with his sons. They didn't need to be spoiled by his presence. Let Lucia take care of them herself. He'd rather keep an eye on his beloved Pamela. Lucia now remembered her marriage to Angelus with a touch of amazement. How kind and naive she had been for those 8 years. How poor her life was with a man like him. Now she no longer wasted time on grocery store apps collecting all the discount coupons. Her sons, her little helpers, had grown up and were becoming manly in their childish ways. Middle son Vitali was heading to the 1st grade in a brand new uniform. He wouldn't have to wear his older brother's hand-me-downs. Ventura strutted proudly through daycare in his gorgeous sandals, crafted just for him by Uncle Otan. No one else had such bright and comfortable shoes with fairy tale appliques. Lucia hadn't told Otan, now her closest friend, that she had been compiling a photo collection of his works over the past year. He still crafted shoes, sandals, and sneakers based on his sketches, following his boundless imagination. Once, a portfolio of photos of her flower arrangements had paved her way to her dream profession, given her the confidence to believe in her abilities, allowed her to earn a decent living, and made a name for herself in the floral world. Recently, Lucia had stumbled upon an article online about an upcoming exhibition. Shoemakers from all over the world would gather there. She found the event's contact information, had her message translated into a foreign language at a special bureau, and sent an email with photos of Otan's creations attached. The hope that her message would get noticed was slim. But only those who dare to take the first step can walk the road. So why not give it a try? Lucia had a small crush on her smiling friend, but she never tried to take the initiative. Otan had shown no clear romantic interest in her. She wouldn't push herself on him. Besides, she barely had time for romance. No grand event in town went on without her involvement now. She decorated venues for restaurant banquets, and they wowed guests with their culinary talent. It all came together brilliantly. Orders were rolling in nonstop. The next month was again filled with daily commissions. During the weekend, she remembered. It had been a long time since she checked her email. What if there was a message from the exhibition? A letter in a language she didn't understand had indeed ended up in her inbox. Lucia immediately copied it into an online translator. Somehow, she made out that Otan had been invited to the competition, not as a main participant but as an esteemed honorary guest. From the enthusiastic invitation, Lucia understood only that foreigners found Otan's work beautiful, fashionable, and even a bit magical. They wanted him to come with his shoe samples for the final exhibition. Lucia's heart was rejoicing. She laughed. I'll take care of all the preparations for the trip and only inform Otan when it's all set. Then she thought about it. It wouldn't be possible to do it quietly. Otan did have a passport, but he hadn't received an official invitation. The visa would take some effort. Lucia herself had recently been to the Netherlands with her boss. The visa center had unexpectedly been generous then. Lucia had decorated a corporate event for them, so they issued her visa immediately. She would go with Otan to the competition and exhibition. Besides, the man had a slight limp and was a bit self-conscious about it. It would be easier for them together. And since the boys were still on school vacation, her parents could look after them. After listening to Lucia, Otan said, "Lucia, what are you thinking? Where am I, and where are those foreign masters? Compared to them, I'm nothing but dust under the blazing sun. Gods don't descend from Olympus to mere mortals unless they have personal reasons. And what am I supposed to bring to the exhibition? All my works I sell at a fair price to ordinary people. You, the boys, wear my creations with pleasure, but it's all simple, everyday shoes or sandals, nothing outstanding. Such contests and exhibitions require a lot of preparation, a lot of time, and now there's only a couple of weeks left. Thank you, but all your efforts were in vain. I'm not there yet. Honestly, it's laughable and foolish for me to expect anything." Lucia was disappointed, but forcing her friend into anything wasn't in her nature. The incident was forgotten. The foreigners didn't try to contact her again. The fashion world doesn't extend its embrace twice. Fame is too honorable a matter, and striving for success is an entirely voluntary desire. A month later, Vitali started first grade, and Ventura moved up to the final group at daycare. Now Lucia's mom barely had time to check on all three boys' lessons. Otan's refusal to take a chance and go to the exhibition cooled Lucia's enthusiasm. She decided that the saying about initiative being punishable had some truth to it. By the time the New Year's holidays approached, she had her hands full. Colorful corporate events with pine and flower compositions for everyone had consumed her entirely. Life went on, and Otan rarely appeared. Lucia and the children decided to celebrate New Year's at home. They would decorate a huge, fluffy tree, she would make treats, and the winter festivities always offered such an interesting and varied TV program that no one wanted to go outside in the cold and bad weather. For something a bit different, they decided in advance to go to the water park. They hadn't been back since that unpleasant encounter with Angelus, and they wanted to go again. This time, they could afford to sit in that restaurant, but they didn't plan anything ahead of time. They'd see what they felt like once they were there. Despite it being December 31st, the turquoise pools were quite crowded. Autumn had once again been dreary and slushy. Winter then took over abruptly and relentlessly: snow, frost, ice. Everyone was, of course, waiting for Santa Claus to come, but they didn't forget to dream about the warm, lovely summer with all its delights. By now, the whole crew could swim anywhere but the kiddie pool. They rode the slides until they were dizzy, sprawled out on soft towels on sun loungers, and ran a couple of times to get burgers and cola. Time flew by. They changed their minds about staying for dinner. The snacks had been filling enough. They headed towards the exit as a group when Lucia suddenly stopped in her tracks. This can't be. It's déjà vu. Behind the same glass, at the same table, sat the same woman, Angelus's lover. What's more, she was wearing the same red dress. Only the man was different. Lucia hesitated. Their homewrecker was gazing just as dreamily into the eyes of her new companion. It was like a painting, same heroine, new hero. Lucia realized that her ex-husband, if he hadn't already been dumped, was close to it. He had lost. The evening before New Year's Eve, when they returned home, was full of surprises and magic. First, around 8 in the evening, the doorbell rang. Standing at the door was Ada. "You won't turn me away, Lucia? I came to thank you. After those 2 sessions at the sanatorium, my legs are working much better. I'm able to go outside a little. Came to visit you. I don't want to spend New Year's with Angelus. Things between us have gotten really bad. And you and the kids have always been like family to me. Will you take in an old lady?" Lucia warmly embraced her mother-in-law. "I won't turn you away. I'll be more than happy to have you. Come in, the boys will be thrilled to see you too." The home adventures didn't end there. An hour before midnight, another timid knock sounded at the door. Zacharias opened it and soon dragged a bashful Otan, holding a box, into the room with the Christmas tree. "My greetings to this fine company. An old friend and neighbor dragged me over to join him for the holiday. And what about me? Should I spend New Year's alone? Is there a place for me at your beautiful table?" Zacharias, Vitali, and Ventura immediately crowded around Uncle Otan from all sides, eyeing the box curiously. He took out 3 gift bags for them. Then he smiled at Ada and said, "For you, dear lady, I have a box of fine chocolates. Happy upcoming New Year. And this is for you, Lucia." A typical marriage proposal is accompanied by a ring. I have a different kind of gift. Otan unwrapped the paper to reveal a pair of stunning shoes with silver buckles. Everyone in the room froze in admiration. They were magnificent. The shoes from the store, the ones that had led to the discord in Lucia's and Angelus's lives, were nothing compared to these. Anyone would understand that, even someone who knew nothing about fashion. "Lucia, if my disability doesn't bother you, I've loved you with all my heart for a long time. Will you marry me? And, kids, I'd like to be your father and mentor." An awkward silence settled in. Then Ventura, who was the first to recover, said loudly, "Mommy, since you don't have daughters, can my brothers and I carry your train when you get married? I saw that's how princesses are dressed for weddings." A second later, everyone at the table burst into laughter. The tension was broken. Suddenly, everyone began sharing their emotions and happiness. Lucia looked at Otan, who was waiting eagerly for her answer, and smiled at him. "I'm a free woman now. A husband like you, Otan, you're a gift to any woman. I'd be honored to be your wife. The general joy was interrupted by Ada's voice. Where's the champagne in this house? Midnight is almost upon us, and we're not ready. I think it's the perfect time to toast to new happiness, and then, when the clock strikes midnight, to the new year. May it be a little different, lighter, and more promising for all of us. I think everyone here deserves that. Later, as everyone hugged when the clock struck midnight, Otan thought to himself, I won't tell her just yet that the photos of her new shoes caused a sensation at another competition, and now I've received an official invitation to participate as a designer. This time, I have a full 6 months to prepare for this important event. They would have a proper honeymoon in the summer. After all, it should be the husband who provides for the family's financial well-being. He would win over the hearts of fashion enthusiasts, and Lucia would eventually give him a daughter. His plans for the future were ambitious. For now, he was simply endlessly happy.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe.